Kiss that glaring summer sun goodbye, because I just installed an electric sunshade. Now, I first started seeing these little sunshades pop up a few months back now, but I waited to buy one because I knew exactly what I wanted, and I knew what features I wanted mine to have. So throughout this video, I'll go through what those little features that were important to me are and why I chose to buy this particular one who had all of those features. So I'm gonna walk you through step by step how to install this sunshade in the Cybertruck. And if you stick around at the very end, I'll give you my 2 cents worth in a review and what I think of it. But first, let's start with the unboxing. So this came in a gigantic box, which to me was good news because that meant obviously I'm not getting out of the installation process, but now the release won't be an assembly process. So it comes in one big piece. And as everything I've gotten from Tesstudio, it comes really well packaged. Then just some really basic hardware and a transformer and a little screwdriver. Okay, so a little bit to my surprise, in order to get to this electric, I actually have to open up this little frunk and get to it from actually down below. If you want to see a video on how to do that, I'll put the link below. So I'm going to blow through it right now to get to the next step. So as I mentioned, if you want to see the video of how to get this frunk out, I'll put that link down in the description below. But really, it's pretty simple. Once you've done it a couple times, there's a top piece of plastic, pulls out with some clips. That frunk shell is 6 10mm bolts. That's really about it. So now I have to grab power from down below here in the truck. Now I've already tapped into this to get power to my electric running board, so it's not going to look quite the same as somebody who's never done that. So I'll show you, as you can see here in the video, what it looks like before you tap into it here. Just, I don't think a big deal, but nonetheless, we're about to find out if I can still power my boards and the sunshade, which I'm sure I can. I'm going to have to undo this and jump it just a little bit different than what somebody might do if they've obviously never done this before. All right, so I'm not even sure if this is the step I should have done first, but it's what I did. So I slid it in there, and then I realized if I moved this little seat forward, it was going to be easier to put this thing up into place, at least to kind of see what I had to do. So on the front of this shade, there's 2 little L brackets which are stick underneath like this little felt piece. Now this whole little piece could pop off, so those little pieces there you see have to slide up underneath that, so they're going to look something like this when they go up flush with the glass. One went in easy, but the other one made me pull this down first, which was not an issue because it just pulls out with some little plastic like rivet type clips, and it just pops back into place. It's going to look something like this. And I pulled it out just enough where it kind of wedged against the back. Okay, so I did this wrong a couple times before I figured it out. So when putting these little bumpers in, you're going to have 4 smaller ones that look like this. Again, they're going to have felt on one side and plastic on the other. The felt's always going to go up by the glass. But you're also going to have a larger one. Now, I initially thought the larger one went way up by the front, but then I initially thought the larger one went way by the back, but it doesn't. Oddly enough, it actually goes in the middle. So when you stretch this out along here, this little control is going to be getting wider. So this gap grows. It starts really small down here and it grows and it gets down here. So this larger one here is going to be in the middle, which is going to be forces it open. Now you don't have a third largest one because the very end, you're actually going to put here on the back side underneath here. And so it's going to be grabbing from this side and not from this side. And again, here's the 2 side by side. There's the larger one, and then the shorter one there is going to go towards the front and middle of the truck. Again, so here's the large size one. And I'd say it's a medium level force to push this into that sidewall. Then the small one is going to go here in the back. Again, I would describe this as just a medium level of force. And once you have it in all the way, it just clips over that little ridge in the little bracket. And then it's just a matter of finding the open hole in the bracket itself and screwing it in. And then it's the same steps over on the other side. Okay, so now that I got all 6 of those little mounting pads up in the ceiling and the rack is completely screwed to those, now I have to deal with this, the wire, and these 2 wires here, the red and the black, are what are eventually going to run all up to the front of that truck to attach that power feed to actually give this whole thing power. So I don't know that there's an exact path you have to follow, but this was the easiest because this whole little center section kind of pops out if you pull some clips, and it does have to pull with a decent amount of strength. But once you pop this down, you can slide it in, then you kind of slide over. I kind of moved around my mirror there. Then I don't totally remove it, this little side trim here along the door and window, but I just tuck this in all the way around. Same thing, I tuck it in all the way around. Then when I get down to this lower section, this is where it gets a little more tricky. I pulled out this little weather stripping, then this little piece of the edge of the dash, and this little lower piece, again, just some clips that exposed a big cavity I was gonna be able to fish some wires through. Okay, so now to the point where this little wire here, this is what we just pulled through. So I'm gonna run this cord down here. I'm actually gonna go into the cavity of the car, then I'm gonna come back up inside a little hollow of the car, out this little hole right there. And the reason I have to go down then back up is just because there's no direct access from inside to the outside right there. There's a little hollow of the truck inside. Again, I'm gonna go down, kind of come back up inside. Now I have a little grommet in there because I added that when I put in the electronic running boards and I had to fish the wires up back the same. So before that, it was just a little metal hole. I'm gonna go down inside the truck here and fish my wire out through that little hole, and then we're gonna find a little cavity and run it up to the front of the truck. Okay, so it's going to be a little tricky to get from that hole that grommet's coming out down into the side of the truck. So I'm gonna use this tool here. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these before. I get these at Harbor Freight, and this one I've had forever. It's all beat up, but this is really cool because if you pull on this little handle here, it's going to extend out a little claw here. I think you can see that there. So squeezing this extends that. I'm gonna fish this down in through that hole, and once I have it in position, I'm gonna put this out, extend the little claw, grab those wires, unhinge it, and then I'm gonna pull it all the way back through. And this little tool here actually was a lifesaver and worked to total perfection. It was a little tricky to kind of force on through there, but eventually I got it through and it grabbed that little wire just as I had planned. Then I just slowly and deliberately pulled it back out. All right, so this is the cord that came out. Again, this is the cord that I ran to my running board. You can kind of see in there, we're really looking for, you can see a little bit of daylight at the end. So I have this stiff, flexible fish tape that I'm just gonna wrap this wire around too, because I don't think it really need to tape it off. And I just slide it in between that little gap up to the front of the hood. Once I push it through, I went around and got it from the other side, then I could just pull it through and I fish it underneath this little metal next to like the little windshield washer reservoir. And then it was a matter of just finding that little connection, and I had to find a way to put this together. And again, I only have this little hole connection because it's what came with my electronic running board, so typically you wouldn't have to undo what I'm doing now. All right, but we can't just directly tap into these wires yet because we have to use this little transformer to bring the voltage down. And so this transformer is gonna transform what's 48 volts coming out of the truck down to 12 volts is what the shade's gonna actually use inside. So the problem I have left with these is I have 4 wires. There's a red, a black, a yellow, and another black, but there's no label. So I don't know which ones go in, which ones go out. So I think I'm gonna actually be forced to use the instructions. Okay, so the directions say red and black go in. So I'm gonna take the power from the truck and run it into this reverter. And then the out is gonna be the yellow and black. So the transformer came with these little quick connects on all 4 wires, but I'm just wire nutting these now. So I just cut off and just strip down the black and the red wire, which of course now I have to join to that little transformer first, but then also I have to tie back in my running board. So it's really 3 wires. So do the same thing with the red wires, then the same thing, obviously, then with the black. Then the quick connects left on the transformer do quickly connect to the remaining wires from the Sunshade. Then it's a matter of just tucking it back up into place. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and power it back on before I put everything back together just to make sure everything works. If you don't know how to do that, I'll show you here on the screen really quick. All right, so you gotta bring up the main menu, which is the little car icon down low. Once you bring that up, you're gonna have the whole drop-down menu. You're looking for outlets and mods. Once you select outlets and mods, you're gonna see this screen here. Now this feed we're working on right there is the power feed, so that's where we're going to turn it on just by one little press of the button, and it looks blue when it's turned on. And as I mentioned earlier, that power feed is what controls my electronic running board you see down there. So when I open my door, they come on. So that power is also got from that little front feed. And if you haven't seen that video, make sure you scroll back up a few weeks because that's a cool one to check out also. Okay, so now I'm left with 3 little different wires. I got that one over there, that one right there above my head, and this one back here. I'm gonna slide the little velvet, that little suede piece back over on top of this. But that's gonna connect to these 3 wires in those 3 different spots. So I finagled this cover back into the back seat and up on top of the seats, ready to push up. All right, so I will have to get this up close enough to stick first, so I might actually even like recline these front seats back to where I can set it on there, so we'll hold it close enough. But then these just stick with Velcro. So if you see here, all these different spots, there's corresponding little Velcro here on the ceiling everywhere, so they should just stick right on once I get the wire snapped into place. So that's exactly what I did. I went ahead and moved these seats to better help me. I did this several times throughout the process with both the cover and the actual frame, moved the seats into position where they acted as kind of another hand for me. Then I just plugged in each of these 3 wires individually, which was no problem. All right, so now I went to try to Velcro this little top on, and I was having trouble getting it to click into place, and then I realized why I couldn't get it. I just ran this wire off the top down into here, but not realizing when this comes out, it's gonna be a track right here. So I need to fish this back behind here and pull it in this way and then plug it back into the little harness here. And with those now tucked around the outside of the frame, it all snapped together really well. Then it was a matter of just pushing this little cover back up, all the little Velcro sticking on each individual spots. All right, so let me give you a quick review of everything from the install and the early on functioning, at least how I see it. As far as the install, it's actually very simple. Very similar to sunshades I put on other vehicles, including my Model Y Juniper I did a few weeks ago. I did this install entirely by myself, and it took about an hour and 30 minutes, but that includes me trying to record as I was doing with one hand, holding my camera with the other. It should have taken me probably closer to an hour. Now, if you don't have this kind of experience, and you're not handy with working on vehicles and things like this, I could see this taking you upwards of 2 hours, especially if you're not familiar with taking apart that whole frunk area. But it's all very manageable and no one step is really complicated. I'll mention a couple of the downsides before we get to the many positives. So this is gonna lower the ceiling, especially right here in the middle, by about 3.5 to 4 inches. Now that being said, even the ad online will say that a person that's 6'2" or 6'3" or more still won't have a problem. So I'm 5'9", 5'10". You can see I still have plenty of inches of clearance, but also my seat's probably a little bit higher than what you would normally want. So I could probably drop my seat another inch or so and make a little bit more room. But if you are a big guy or if you have big passengers on a regular basis, I'm talking like 6'5", 6'7", or bigger, I could see potentially you rubbing here. But if that's not you or anyone you ride with, then that's really a non-factor to me. Another potential downside, as you saw, as you'll see again here, is this whole top shell sticks to the little frame with Velcro. Now, that's a plus to make the install simpler, but it's a downside as it's just hanging by Velcro. Now, like everything I do, I'll update this. Give me a month or two, or maybe less if I find out it goes bad, and I'll update you on how well this stays and how the functions all continue to work. But as I see it right now, it does hold pretty strong, but I'm cautiously optimistic to see if it's going to continue to do that. One reason I chose to buy this specific sunshade, or at least I was waiting out for it, is I had a sunshade previously on my old Model Y. It was a 2020, and I did have a button up in the front, as this one does up here, which was nice, but my passengers couldn't control that. So if somebody back here wanted to control the shade, because especially in this vehicle here, this would be more affecting the passenger, they wouldn't have access. This particular sunshade, in addition to having that up there, in addition to having the voice command, which I'll get to in a second, also has buttons here on the passenger side and also over there on the driver's side. So it has 3 different sets of buttons. So another cool thing about this, it does have like the auto open, just like your windows have. Now, if you touch and hold this just for a couple spurts, for example, you're going to see it's going to move as I hold it. But if you want it to completely shut or completely open, if you just tap that button either way, a single one press, it'll just take off and it'll auto shut. Any direction will stop it. Again, if I hold it, it's going to move forward. But if I just single touch, it's going to take off and open all the way in like the auto position. Another potential downside is the same downside I mentioned earlier, is you are dropping a little bit lower. Now here above my head, it's not as low as what this little bump out right here was, but you'll notice it is probably about 1 3/4 inches, under 2 inches, but a significant little gap closer to my head. Again, I'm 5'9", 5'10" adult. I have a hat on, and I now only have maybe 1 inch or 2 of clearance. So if you have a passenger in the back seat that's maybe 6'2" or taller, then there's a chance they're gonna rub their head on this. Now, the benefit I have right here is I can always move the sunshade out of the way and get that 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches back if I had a taller passenger. And I could even stop the shade in the middle and still present some sun and still give myself the maximum height. So again, a potential negative, but ultimately you can mitigate it. Another potential downside is all the installation that goes with this. Now, I would have liked, into a perfect world, for this to all have gone together without pulling this out. But I've learned from other things, like that S92 camera I have, that it draws sometimes maybe too much internal power and you have problems. So my guess is some of these suppliers have potentially learned from that and now made it to where we draw the power here from this power feed, where there's all kinds of excess power, and it's no longer an issue of maxing out that power inside the truck. But it is still nonetheless a little bit of a drag. But as hopefully you saw in this video, it's not as bad as it looks like. And it's certainly something you can handle, especially if you have a friend give you a hand. And then the last little feature I want to point out is the voice activation. This is not as useful as maybe what it sounds like. It's more of like a party trick. But that being said, I will use the fire out of this thing every time I have somebody in my car for the next couple of months. So this is actually very similar to my 2020 Model Y, that you activate it by using the word TT. For example, you'd say, "Hello, TT.
I am here."
And then it responds by saying, "I am here," which you just heard, although in a Chinese accent, which is kind of cool. So here's one more example. You open the sunshade.
Open.
There it goes. After that little pause, it opens up. It'll do several different commands like open and shut, but nonetheless, it's a pretty cool little thing to have. Looking cool while staying cool. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.